She never loved you. She loved the version of you that exists in her imagination. And the moment you stopped playing that role, she replaced you. You thought it was about you, but it was never about you. The pattern repeats itself, doesn't it? That moment when you realize you've been abandoned, not because you failed, but because you became real. You showed vulnerability. You stepped out of character. And suddenly, her eyes changed. That warmth you once felt became distant. That desire became disappointment, and you're left wondering what you did wrong. But here's the truth that few men ever discover. You didn't do anything wrong. You simply stopped being the man she imagined you to be. It feels like betrayal, doesn't it? That crushing weight in your chest when someone who claimed to love you suddenly looks at you like a stranger. You replay every moment, searching for the fatal mistake, the thing you said or did that caused everything to collapse. But what if there was no mistake? What if the collapse was inevitable from the very beginning? What if the version of you she fell in love with never actually existed? Outside her imagination, why do you always feel like you're being replaced? Why does the cycle of meeting someone, feeling understood, then watching it all collapse continue to haunt you? Why, despite your best intentions, despite your genuine efforts to love authentically, do you keep finding yourself discarded for reasons you can't comprehend? Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychologist who mapped the depths of the human unconscious, discovered something profound about human relationships. He found that people don't always fall in love with the real person standing before them. They fall in love with an image they've projected onto that person. For women specifically, Jung identified what he called the animus, an ideal masculine figure that exists in their unconscious mind from a very early age. This internal image shapes who they're attracted to, who they choose, and most importantly, who they eventually reject when reality doesn't match the fantasy. Think about it. Have you ever noticed how quickly someone can go from seeing you as perfect to seeing you as deeply flawed? How the very qualities they once admired in you suddenly become the reasons they resent you. This dramatic shift isn't rational, it's psychological. It's what happens when projection collides with reality. This isn't a video about blame. This isn't about creating division between men and women. This is an invitation to step into awareness, to understand the psychological forces that have been shaping your relationships without your knowledge, and through that understanding, to find freedom. Because the path to becoming whole, to becoming truly yourself, begins with seeing the invisible scripts you've been unconsciously following. Scripts that were written long before you entered the stage. Scripts that determine how the story ends before the first word is even spoken. If this video has already touched something deep within you, take a moment to pause and reflect. What patterns in your relationships have felt beyond your control? Remember that moment while we continue. She doesn't love you. She loves the image you unconsciously play. Think back to the beginning of your most significant relationships. There was something magical about how she looked at you, wasn't there? You felt seen, chosen, special, as if finally someone recognized your true value. But what if that wasn't your true value she saw? What if it was something else entirely? Jung discovered that we all carry within us psychological blueprints of the ideal partner. For women, this is the animus, the masculine archetype that forms in their unconscious mind through their relationship with their father, male figures in their early life, and cultural stories about what a man should be. When a woman meets you, she doesn't just see you. She sees you through the filter of this internal image. And when certain aspects of you align with this image, projection occurs. Suddenly, you're not just a man. You're the man, the one she's been waiting for all her life. And without realizing it, you step into a role in a play you never auditioned for. You become the hero who will save her, the healer who will fix her wounds, the the wise man who will guide her, the strong provider who will never falter. Like an actor without a script, you sense what's expected and you perform accordingly. Consider James, who noticed his girlfriend, Elena, became distant whenever he expressed uncertainty about his career. Elena had grown up with a father who never wavered in his decisions, who always knew exactly what to do. Unconsciously, she projected this expectation onto James. When James sensed her disappointment, he began hiding his doubts, pretending confidence when he felt none. The performance worked. Elena's warmth returned. But at what cost? The subtle cues are everywhere, though you may not consciously register them. The way her eyes light up when you demonstrate strength, but cloud with confusion when you show vulnerability. The warmth in her voice when you take charge. The slight edge when you express uncertainty. These tiny reactions shape you, mold you, train you to become what she needs you to be. And it feels good, doesn't it? To be the answer to someone's prayers. To be the hero in someone's story. To step into a role that seems to fit so perfectly, that brings such approval, such affection, such desire. It's intoxicating to be wanted, the way she wants you when you're playing the part. You feel her approval when you match the image. You feel her disappointment when you don't. And slowly, unconsciously, you begin to mold yourself to fit the contours of her fantasy. This isn't manipulation on her part. She isn't aware of it either. This is the unconscious at work, the invisible psychological forces that Jung dedicated his life to understanding. She believes she loves you for who you are, not realizing that what she's fallen in love with is an image she's projected onto you. And you believe you finally found someone who truly sees and appreciates you, not realizing that what's being seen and appreciated is only the parts of you that match her unconscious template of the ideal man. The quiet tragedy begins when you start to believe that her approval of your performance is the same as her love for your authentic self. It's not, and the moment you discover this truth is the moment everything begins to change. There comes a day when you can no longer maintain the performance. Perhaps you're exhausted. Perhaps life has dealt you a blow that strips away your ability to keep up the facade. Perhaps you simply forget to play the role for a moment. You show weakness when the script calls for strength. You express doubt when the script calls for certainty. You reveal fear when the script calls for courage. You admit confusion when the script calls for wisdom. And something shifts in her eyes. Something changes in her response to you. The warmth cools, the desire wanes. The respect diminishes. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in subtle ways that you feel deep in your core. It might start with a slight hesitation before she responds to you. A barely perceptible withdrawal of physical affection. Questions that feel more like tests than genuine curiosity. Comments that seem innocent on the surface but carry an undertone of disappointment or criticism. You haven't become less. You've simply become real. But reality isn't what the projection wanted. The projection wanted the fantasy, the archetype, the perfect masculine image that exists in her unconscious mind. Jung called this moment projection collapse. When the ideal image that's been projected onto you shatters against the shores of your humanity. And when this collapse occurs, something disturbing happens in the psyche of the projector. The person who once saw you as the embodiment of their ideal now sees you as a betrayer. Not because you've actually betrayed them, but because you've betrayed the image they projected onto you. You've failed to be what they unconsciously needed you to be. And in that moment, you feel the withdrawal of their affection like a cold wind. You sense the disappointment, the disillusionment, the subtle or not so subtle message that you are no longer enough. Take Daniel, whose wife Claire always saw him as the rock in their relationship. When Daniel's company downsized and he lost his job, he experienced anxiety and depression for the first time. Rather than receiving support, he noticed Claire becoming increasingly critical, even contemptuous. "You need to snap out of it," she told him. "This isn't like you." But it was like him. It was the part of him he'd never allowed her to see. The conversations become strained, the silences grow longer. The intimacy that once felt so effortless now requires exhausting effort to maintain. Every interaction feels like walking through a minefield. One wrong step and everything explodes. You find yourself apologizing more, though you're not entirely sure what for. You catch yourself making promises of change, of improvement, of becoming better, though what better means remains frustratingly vague. You just know that somehow, in some way, you're not measuring up anymore. The cruel irony is that you're being punished not for a failure of character, but for the revelation of your true character. Not for becoming worse, but for no longer pretending to be something you're not. This is where most men make their fatal mistake. They try to regain what they've lost by doubling down on the performance. They try to be more of what they think she wants, working harder at the role, sacrificing more of their authenticity in a desperate bid to recapture her projection. They become more accommodating, more self-sacrificing, more eager to please. They walk on eggshells, monitoring every word, suppressing every authentic impulse that might threaten the fragile remnants of the connection. They twist themselves into increasingly painful contortions, hoping that if they just try hard enough, they can become the man she thought they were. But it never works, because once the projection has collapsed, it cannot be rebuilt on the same foundation. The unconscious has seen behind the curtain, and it cannot unsee. This is the point at which many relationships end, though the ending may be prolonged, painful, and confusing. She might tell you she doesn't know what she wants, or that she needs space to figure things out. She might say, "You've changed," or "I don't feel the same way anymore." She might even accuse you of deception, as if you deliberately misled her about who you were. And the greatest confusion comes from the fact that in many ways, you did change. You did present yourself as someone you weren't. Not out of malice or manipulation, but out of the deeply human desire to be loved, to be chosen, to be enough. You played a role that wasn't authentic to your full self, and for a time, you were rewarded for that performance with affection, approval, and desire. The punishment comes, not when you fail at the role, but when you can no longer bear to play it. Take a breath. Think about your own experiences. Have you felt that shift? That moment when someone's perception of you changed not because you did something wrong, but because you showed them who you really are? If this resonates with you, pause the video for a moment of reflection. Then let's continue our journey together. The real betrayal is not her rejection of your authentic self. The real betrayal is your rejection of your authentic self in order to be chosen by her. Self-betrayal, Jung noted, is the first death of the soul. When you contort yourself to fit the projections of others, you don't gain love. You lose yourself. You become a hollow vessel, filled with the expectations of those around you. And no matter how much approval you receive for your performance, it never touches the authentic self that lies buried beneath the persona. This is the quiet tragedy that unfolds in the lives of so many men. They believe they're making reasonable compromises for love. They believe they're simply being what a good partner should be, but in reality, they're slowly erasing their own identity, replacing it with a carefully constructed image designed to maintain the approval of someone who never truly saw them to begin with. And here's the cruel irony. The more you succeed at being what you think she wants, the less she actually wants you. Because the masculine energy that most powerfully attracts the feminine isn't accommodation or performance. It's authentic presence. It's the man who knows himself and stands firmly in that knowledge, regardless of whether it pleases those around him. There's a reason why the bad boy archetype holds such enduring appeal. It's not the negativity or the rebelliousness that creates the attraction. It's the unapologetic authenticity, the refusal to perform, the commitment to self-honesty even when it costs them the approval of others. Meanwhile, the nice guy, the man who does everything right, who follows all the rules, who molds himself to meet expectations, finds himself repeatedly passed, over, or eventually discarded. Not because he's too good, but because his goodness isn't authentic. It's a performance designed to earn the love he doesn't believe he deserves through the simple act of being himself. Jung observed that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. The journey toward wholeness begins when you recognize this pattern, when you see how you've been complicit in your own disappearance, when you understand that the love you've been seeking, the love that depends on you playing a role, isn't love at all. It's simply the momentary satisfaction of someone else's unconscious needs being met through your performance. And that realization, painful as it may be, contains within it the seeds of your liberation. Because once you see the cage, you can finally begin to find the key. The key is not in trying harder to be what others want. It's not in becoming more skilled at the performance or finding someone whose projections more closely align with your natural tendencies. The key is in the courageous act of putting down the mask and allowing yourself to be seen as you truly are, with all your strength and all your weakness, all your wisdom and all your confusion, all your courage and all your fear. This doesn't mean becoming selfish or inconsiderate of others' needs. It means recognizing that the most valuable gift you can offer another person is your authentic presence, not a performance crafted to earn their approval, but the raw, unfiltered truth of who you are. Because anything less isn't really you, and a connection built on anything less than the truth isn't really love. It's just mutual projection. 2. People using each other to act out unconscious psychological dramas, neither one truly seeing or being seen by the other. Jung understood that this path toward authenticity isn't easy. It requires confronting your own shadow, the parts of yourself you've denied, suppressed, or disowned. It means feeling the terror of potential rejection. It means standing alone in your truth, even when every instinct urges you to compromise for the sake of connection. But on the other side of that terror lies the only form of love worth having, a love that doesn't require you to betray yourself to be chosen, love that emerges from the genuine recognition of one authentic human being by another. And until you're willing to risk everything for that authenticity, you'll remain trapped in the cycle of performance and rejection, wondering why the love you work so hard to earn feels so empty when you finally receive it. Jung spoke of a process he called individuation, the psychological journey toward becoming a complete, undivided self. This is not the path of the man who seeks approval. This is the path of the man who seeks truth. Individuation begins with a simple but radical choice: to stop explaining yourself, to stop justifying your existence, to stop seeking understanding from those who are committed to misunderstanding you, to stop trying to prove your worth to those who measure value by how well you meet their needs. Consider how much energy you've spent trying to make yourself understood. The lengthy explanations, the desperate attempts to clarify your intentions, the exhausting efforts to convince someone that you're not who they've decided you are. All of that energy flows in one direction, outward, away from your center, depleting your vital force without ever reaching its intended destination. Because the truth is, Those who are determined to misunderstand you will never be persuaded by your explanations. Those who are invested in seeing you through the lens of their projections will simply interpret your words as further evidence of whatever they've already decided you are. This is not about becoming cold or distant. This is about establishing the boundaries of your selfhood with such clarity that they cannot be violated by the projections of others. The individual man doesn't need to argue. He doesn't need to be convinced. He doesn't need to perform. He simply is, fully present, fully aware, fully himself. When someone misinterprets his words or actions, he doesn't launch into a defensive explanation. He doesn't try to manage their perception of him. He acknowledges their perspective without accepting it as his responsibility to change it. "I understand that's how you see it" becomes a complete response, requiring no further elaboration. When someone judges him based on their projections, he doesn't internalize that judgment. He doesn't scramble to disprove it. He recognizes it as information about their inner world, not about his reality. You're entitled to your opinion becomes a shield against the arrows of other people's unconscious material. When someone withdraws their approval because he's stepped out of the role they assigned him, he doesn't chase after that approval. He doesn't negotiate for its return. He accepts its absence as the natural consequence of his authenticity. "I'm sorry you feel that way" becomes the period at the end of a sentence, not the beginning of a plea for reconciliation. And in that authentic presence, something remarkable happens. He becomes psychologically untouchable, not because he has built walls, but because he has become so firmly rooted in his own truth that the opinions and projections of others no longer shake his foundation. This is the strength that doesn't come from being recognized. It comes from no longer needing recognition. It comes from understanding, as Jung put it, that your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. When you stop seeking external validation, you become immune to external invalidation. When you no longer base your worth on others' assessment of your value, their reassessment cannot devalue you. When you are no longer performing for approval, the withdrawal of that approval no longer threatens your sense of self. When you reach this state of psychological sovereignty, you notice something strange. People's reactions to you change. Those who were drawn to you because you fulfilled their projections may withdraw. Those who wanted you to play a role in their psychological drama may become frustrated or angry. But others, those who are doing their own inner work, those who are capable of seeing beyond their projections, are drawn to your authenticity like moths to a flame. Your relationships no longer drain you because they're no longer based on performance. Your connections no longer confuse you because they're no longer contaminated by unconscious projections, either yours or theirs. You stand firmly in your truth, quietly raising your head above the psychological fog that keeps most men trapped in cycles of performance and rejection. And for the first time, perhaps, you begin to experience what it means to be truly seen. If you're finding value in this perspective, take a moment to engage with this video. Like it, share it with someone who might benefit, or save it to watch again. Your engagement helps others discover this message who might be struggling with the same challenges you faced. When you no longer perform, you no longer attract those who are in love with the performance. This is perhaps the most liberating truth of Jung's psychological insights. Authentic presence attracts authentic connection. As you walk the path of individuation, as you reclaim the parts of yourself you've abandoned for approval, something shifts in your relationships with women. You no longer attract those who unconsciously need you to fulfill a role in their psychological drama. You begin to encounter women who are doing their own inner work, women who are integrating their own animus rather than projecting it onto the men in their lives. These women don't need you to save them because they're learning to save themselves. They don't need you to complete them because they're discovering their own wholeness. They don't need you to be their hero, because they're becoming the heroes of their own story. And in this space of mutual authenticity, something rare and precious becomes possible. A relationship between two whole people who choose each other, not out of psychological necessity, but out of genuine recognition and respect. You'll know these women by the questions they ask. Instead of, "What do you do?" a question designed to categorize you and measure your value, they ask, "What matters to you?" instead of, "Where are you going?" a question that evaluates your ambition and potential. They ask, "Where have you been?" They're interested not in what you can provide or become, but in who you already are. You'll know them by how they respond to your authenticity. When you speak your truth, they don't react with defensiveness or withdrawal. They meet it with their own truth. When you set a boundary, they don't test it or try to break it down. They respect it, even when it doesn't serve their immediate desires. You'll know them by how they handle conflict. They don't use emotional manipulation to control the outcome. They don't resort to personal attacks when they feel threatened. They stay present with the discomfort, trusting that two authentic people can find their way to understanding without either one having to abandon their truth. Jung believed that the highest form of love wasn't projection or infatuation, or even the comfortable companionship that many settle for. The highest form of love was the conscious union of two individuated souls who see each other clearly, without the distorting lens of unconscious needs and fantasies. This doesn't mean perfect understanding. It doesn't mean the absence of conflict. It means that when misunderstandings and conflicts arise, they're addressed from a place of self-awareness rather than unconscious projection. You are no longer the hero in someone else's movie. You are yourself. And that is enough. In this state of being, you experience a profound inner freedom. Not freedom from responsibility or commitment, but freedom from the exhausting burden of trying to be something you're not. And that freedom is worth every difficult step of the journey. She didn't betray you. You just stopped being her fantasy. And for the first time, started being real. Jung didn't teach us to become desirable. He taught us to become whole. The journey we've explored today isn't about learning how to keep someone's approval. It isn't about manipulating female psychology or becoming what women want. It's about something far more profound, reclaiming your authentic self from the clutches of other people's projections. Jung understood that the greatest challenge facing modern man isn't external. It isn't about conquering the world, or accumulating wealth, or even finding the perfect partner. The greatest challenge is internal. It's the reclamation of the soul that has been fragmented and scattered in the desperate attempt to be wanted, needed, and approved of by others. The path of individuation isn't easy. There will be moments of profound loneliness as you step away from the comfortable patterns of performing for approval. There will be relationships that end because they were built on projection rather than authentic connection. There will be times when you question whether the journey is worth the cost. But on the other side of that darkness lies a freedom that few men ever experience. The freedom to be fully, unapologetically yourself. The freedom to stand in your truth without explanation or justification. The freedom to love from wholeness rather than need. This freedom doesn't come all at once. It arrives in moments. Moments when you choose truth over comfort, authenticity over approval, self-respect over external validation. Each of these moments builds upon the last, gradually constructing a foundation of selfhood that cannot be shaken by the opinions or projections of others. And as this foundation strengthens, you'll find yourself making different choices. You'll no longer be drawn to situations that require you to diminish yourself. You'll no longer be attracted to people who want you to play a role, rather than be yourself. You'll no longer sacrifice your authenticity for the temporary comfort of being chosen. Instead, you'll seek experiences that allow you to express your full self. You'll be drawn to connections that celebrate your authenticity rather than demanding your performance. You'll create a life that reflects your truth rather than someone else's expectations. This doesn't mean becoming selfish or uncaring. In fact, the opposite is true. When you're no longer depleting your energy through constant performance, you have more to give. When you're no longer distorting your perception through projection, you can see others more clearly. When you're no longer seeking to be completed by another, you can love more freely without the desperation that comes from need. Don't be afraid of being misunderstood. Every man who walks the path of authenticity will be misunderstood by those who remain trapped in their own unconscious patterns. Don't try to be chosen by people who don't know what they're looking for. Their search is not about you. It's about the unresolved psychological material they're trying to work through by projecting it onto others. Choose yourself firmly, without explanation, without showing off, not as an act of selfishness, but as the necessary foundation for genuine connection with others. Jung believed that the most powerful form of masculinity isn't domination or control. It isn't even the strength to protect or provide. It's the courage to be authentic in a world that constantly demands performance. The willingness to stand in your truth, even when it costs you the approval you've been conditioned to crave. This is the path of the individuated man, the man who has reclaimed his soul from the expectations of others. The man who chooses himself not out of narcissism, but out of self-respect. The man who loves not from emptiness, seeking to be filled, but from fullness, seeking to be shared. And this path is available to you right now, in this moment. It begins with a simple choice, the choice to value your own truth more than others' approval. The choice to see yourself through your own eyes, rather than through the distorting lens of others' projections. The choice to stand firmly in who you are, even when it means standing alone. Because the truth is, you were never meant to be the character in someone else's story. You were meant to be the author of your own. If this message spoke to you, it's because part of you is already awakening to these truths. Don't scroll past this moment of recognition. Like this video as a commitment to your own journey of individuation. Share it with the men in your life who are struggling to understand why their relationships keep following the same painful patterns. Leave a comment about which part of this message resonated most deeply with you. Your perspective might be exactly what another man needs to hear. And subscribe to this channel to continue exploring the depths of masculine psychology and the path to authentic manhood. Because the journey isn't easy, but it's real, and that's all that matters. In the words of Carl Jung himself, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, not in her eyes, not in her approval, not in her desire, but in that acceptance lies the key to everything you've been searching for. But in the quiet center of your own being, where the authentic self has been waiting all along for you to come home. The journey begins now. The choice is yours.